Welcome back, students. Here we have Color Box Part 3. We are going to kind of finish up day 1 of painting our color box. So here is where we're starting. And now that we've got everything kind of blocked in, mixing up some greenish tone. I didn't have a green with me at the moment. It's a light, bright green. Normally I would maybe choose a cadmium green, but instead I'm taking my yellow and my blue and mixing them together, staying much more on that yellow side. Anything that I put on here is going to automatically look a little extra green, mostly because the ground underneath is so bright red already. So things are going to look quite green very quickly. So let's mix up a little bit more of that. And here we go, painting the top plane of that number 6 form. Mostly all I'm thinking about is just blocking things in. Here I'm adding some green to that side where the yellow wall meets the blue wall, because the blue is reflecting into the yellow wall and making it look green. And then the yellow reflects into the blue and makes it look lighter and more greenish as well. Now we're switching over to red. I haven't touched any of the floor or the base of this since I started. So I am going through and mixing extra parts of red into some of the reflected areas of the shadow, and then moving over and doing that also with parts of the floor. Just kind of evening out the tone, giving it a nice even look first, and then I can try to adjust it later after I have that base color and have it evened out. It still had looked a little bit scratchy and a little bit rough from just wiping in that color. So now we'll finish it off and just make it feel more even, kind of like the color that you actually see when you look at the still life. So after I've started that, I'm grabbing a little bit of alizarin. I think, trying to add a little extra to the shadow area and putting some darker tones in there is going to help to make my image, the subjects or the images, the objects, pop out a little bit more. I don't think that I quite got that tone, so before I finish, I'm going to go over and grab a little bit of the transparent blue to even darken that still and even that out even a little more. The thing that's nice about this all being so wet is the fact that I can really have nice soft edges to those cast shadows, up close to an object where the eye sculpture makes the ground. It has a very crisp, strong edge. But as you move out towards the stein and towards the edge of the yellow wall, that strong edge to the shadow disappears. So it's always nice to look for places where you can kind of change an edge to a shadow or to where things might meet. Here I'm blocking in some extra dark tones for the blue. Then I'm going back to the white, and I think we're going to start to try and paint in some of these lights. I'm mixing kind of like a gray, and I'm going to try to start to make the stein look like it's kind of pewter silver kind of look. I do think that things were lined up a little bit before, but now I feel like somehow our videos are out of sync a little bit, but that's okay. So I'm highlighting a lot of the center of the stein where the light is hitting the strongest, and I'll come back and I will change some of those tones and make them brighter as we move on. That kind of evens that out, and now it's time to really focus on bringing some of the light up. As bright and as white as the cast looked to me before, now that I have all the other colors blocked in across the whole picture, now I can judge between the two, and I notice that it really doesn't look white, and it needs to. So I'm going to start to incorporate more brighter, less mixed white paint into the whole sculptural eyeball piece. Just kind of finding the bridge of the nose. Get a little more paint. Then let's build up, the cheek down at the bottom. Or give a little bit of a tone to some of the shadow without overpowering it. If I start to think about any place where I overdo it, I know that I can come back and do a glaze or a velatura where I can change that later. Working on the brow, there's a lot of parts to the brow. In the sculpture, he has like this really, really, squinched brow area. He's angry. And so because of that, there's a lot of wrinkles and a lot of folds and a lot of places where, since I've turned this kind of 3/4 on its side, the light is going to catch a lot of those small spots as you go across. So a little bit more here, build that up. There's a little bit more over here. Moving down towards the cheek, finding little places. I think, I'm trying to be conscious of not overdoing it down on the bottom right, because that area is facing away from the light more, and the area on the top left is the area that faces up towards the light a bit more. Being very gentle and going through and finding those edges, figuring out where to keep them soft. There's a little bit down there along the cheek, just at the very edge of the bag underneath the eye. Trying to be very, very light with the touch down there at the very bottom of the painting. Try not to overdo it. A lot of what I end up doing in a painting like this is keeping everything kind of in the middle zone without getting too hard-edged. If I can keep things a little soft, close to the right color, close to the right value, without having all of it, too strong, that is going to help me out as I move forward. And when I come back to it next time, it usually ends up being nice and bright. So I'm hitting some of these highlights again on the Stein. Really want to kind of bring that out, make it feel reflective and shiny. If it's a shiny object, we should make it look shiny. Little parts on the top edges as well for the lid. And what else are we doing here? Oh, I see. I'm mixing up the darker values. I think I'm going to go back and start to draw in some of the darker shadows. This is where I think I move a little bit of the painting around. Overall, I think the proportions are pretty good, but they're not perfect. And so as I kind of move from the top left edge down to the bottom right, I think I adjust the eye a little bit. But there's like the edge of the brow and how that turns to the side of the face. So I'm letting a little bit of that come in. I'm looking for those dark accents in the smaller areas. There's so many little complex nooks and crannies that are created when you're up close to the inside corner of the eye. Here, I think there's a little bit of blue reflecting into the top edge of that cast, so I'm going to let a little bit of that blue come in. I'm kind of adding a little bit of darkness to some of the bottom edges of the sculpture. Here, I'm kind of using that same value to find the lip of the stein. Here's a little bit of a reflected shadow, which I haven't really done too much of. Finding the little middle edge there, finding some of these other edges. And here's where I think I'm going to come in and start to darken some of the shadows on the floor. A little bit on the left side. Find some of those accents in those areas where I can kind of push it a little bit more. Up into the top lid, moving across. There we go. I think I even added a little touch of black to it to make it extra dark in a couple places. Using some of this to kind of blend it into the shadowy part of the green object there to try and make that shadow edge feel a little bit stronger. There's the bottom edge of the sculpture. Go in, find some of these inside corners of the tear duct, the fold from the eyelid, moving down towards and figuring out where exactly is the iris. It's interesting to try and paint this because when you're thinking about it, you're noticing that it's sculpture. Michelangelo sculpted an iris, but it doesn't look like what you and I think of as the eye. He's got to sculpt it so that when light catches it, it looks like an eyeball, but it's actually sculpture. So it's a different kind of shape, almost like an oval or a circle with a little triangle poking in at the top. And, if we're careful, we can catch those edges and make it work, make it look like it's a sculpture and still looks like an eyeball, even though it's actually physically paint on a canvas. A little bit more on the inside corner, kind of refining the edges and the wrinkles across the brow, trying to get the fall off of light as it moves down and over to the bottom right. Trying to get that nice soft edge where the brow rounds over from the light to the shadow. Here I'm trying to kind of perfect the area of the brow where the eyeball is or the eyebrows are. Here's where I'm adding some darkness to the shadow, and I think that helps quite a bit as far as putting it all together and making it even out quite a bit. So those are about the last touches for this, fixing the shadow of the yellow in the very back, ending up making it a little bit more green. And I think that's about it for this stage. We'll come back to it soon, but once it's dry, we'll add more color. So here's a kind of slow zoom out of the setup, the still life, and my palette. And here we have kind of a shot of the still life versus the painting. We'll see you next time.